Shalom and welcome to a very special edition of Parasha Talk, the Pesach edition of Parasha Talk. We are so excited to be with you to share some thoughts about the upcoming holiday of Pesach. But first, before we begin, let me welcome my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Sheikh Day School, Long Island, and Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanovsky, Anshe Chesed, New York City. Rabbi Kalmanovsky is on his way to Israel. We are recording this before he departs. Have a wonderful, wonderful trip. You want to tell us what you're doing in Israel, or just?
Thank you. Thank you. Assuming that my COVID test comes back appropriately negative, which I certainly do expect, I'm going on Sunday with the family. I'm on sabbatical from the shul, as everyone knows, and my daughter's in a post-high school year in Tel Aviv. So 5 of the Kalmanovsky 6 are going to be together in Netanya for
Amazing.
Passover.
That's great.
On the beach, baby.
We know that it's a very special time, of course, in Israel, holiday time, and we are certainly are mindful of our brothers and sisters in Israel. A little wave of terror that they're experiencing. We're recording the day after a terrible shooting in Tel Aviv. So we are thinking about all of our friends, our Ramah friends in Israel, especially those living in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, those nearby and everywhere who are experiencing this and going through some trepidation even as they approach the holiday. But let it be a peaceful and safe time for you and your family. This is the Seder. I'm going to say this. We have an amazing parsha, but we have an amazing Haggadah. We have an amazing ritual. And I think to kind of warm up here and have some thoughts about what to talk about with you. But I just want to do a little warm up, which is give me your best shot. Give me your best a thought, a text coming up in your mind as you think about the Seder. You're just flipping through it. If we were to do the random Seder text, Haggadah text, talk to me. Give me some Torah. Barry Chesler, think about a text.
One of my favorites is Halach Ma'anya. And, we spend some time each time we do the show talking before we get on, which is sometimes most fascinating. And one of the things that's striking about Halach Ma'anya, which is related to our earlier conversation, is that we sit down at the Seder and we think we know the story and we know everything that's going on, and we really don't. And one of the first things that should surprise us is this passage, Halach Ma'anya, because there the matzah is the bread that our ancestors ate as slaves. It has nothing to do with redemption. When we get to my second favorite passage, which is from the Mishnah about Rabban Gamliel, there the matzah is a symbol of redemption. And our colleague Josh Kutoff, who used to come many years on Pesach, pointed out that there's a kind of transubstantiation from moving the matzah from the bread of affliction to the bread of redemption. And I think, one of the things I like about this is that we don't really spend enough time thinking about what the Exodus actually is, right? We know that we're telling the story of the Exodus, but what is it? Does it begin with us as slaves and we have to remember certain things about that? Is it just the march out of Egypt, leaving the lamb cooked but uneaten according to some of us? Or is it something else? And I think, one of the things that we should do every year we sit down at the Seder is be willing to be surprised by the text.
Absolutely.
And by the new things. We're all a year older and we look at the text differently.
Rabbi Kamenowski, you want to sit and I'll do one, or you want to? I think because mine is in order, or you might be in order too. Who knows?
No, you go next.
I want to go. Okay, so I think I might be just right after Barry's text, which is the Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah, and it's really on a similar theme. I enjoy this text so much. It's an exciting text because it's about the dynamic of telling. It's the master disciple dynamic as opposed to the parent child dynamic, which so that's one notch down from this text. It's about rabbis, but it's along the theme of discovery. And it's I'm reading it now and I'm discovering a new fact about it. It says Hare ani kaven shivim shana, right? I'm not 70 years old. I'm like 70. I'm 60 years old. And that means that I've been reading this text for a good chunk of decades. And I remember reading this text as a young person, thinking like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who, I guess, how old was he? He was 18 or so.
18 according to the
Or,
tradition.
yeah, so he had to present himself as an older person. And look at this, you blink your eyes and you grow up through all the different vicissitudes of life. And I can, very, very distinctly, clearly remember, where I've been in many Seders, in Ottawa, Montreal, New York, and of course here in New Jersey, and a couple in Israel. Um, but what is he saying? He's saying, Lo zachiti shete'amer yetziat Mitzrayim balelot. I never thought about the way that you got to tell the story of the Exodus until I heard this explanation from Benzoma. I love that. Until I heard this, I thought I knew this, but I heard something and I discovered a whole new side to it.
So
Yeah, go ahead. That
I
opens up
just
the
want to
whole
add something here because you talked about the master-disciple relationship. It's so striking that it's Ben Zoma,
Yeah.
who, as his name indicates, never became a rabbi, and yet he is treated here as the master.
Interesting, fascinating. So he makes this innovation. He finds an innovation in the understanding of the text, and that opens up both the potential and the validation of seeing new insights into the text. And I think that this it touches this place, a real streaming vein for all of us. That when it comes to Passover, we're always looking for new ideas and new insights and new explanations. Lately, in the last couple of years, I've been thinking about, what is ancient Egypt and all the kind of research and new understanding that we have of the way that ancient Egypt influenced the Bible. And not only that, but we have the experience of the virus, the pandemic, which totally shifted our understanding of the holiday. And in truth, you can approach this Seder and the telling of the story with new eyes, with new discoveries every single year. That's my favorite thought. Over to you, Jeremy.
Awesome. I think just the dynamic of parent-child question and answering, I think, is whether that's in the Manishtana or the four children who are, three of whom are said to pose questions, and one's Vihigadet alavin chavayomahu. There's someday in the future in which you're going to tell the story to your children. I think that's just such a rich statement about culture and how this culture, transmits these most important pieces of knowledge. This things about the past, because to participate in a society or participate in a culture, you have to know what its experiences have been. But also, and this is what I think is really important about the Haggadahs we've inherited. That we were talking before we started recording about how, the Haggadah is not. It's a Mishnaic era text. It's not an obvious narrative. It doesn't go down easy for people who are looking for the narrative of Egypt. The narrative is not as nearly as thrilling in the Haggadah as it is in the Bible itself. But I don't think that the rabbis were really going for that. They were going for creating some experience of being redeemed in the past, but not redeemed in the present, and reorienting your way of thinking about that to the need for some future redemption. So the questions that the children are said to ask, the questions that the children are supposed to ask in the Manishtana, and then in the four children passage, I think that it is about conveying something of the past, but it's also about orienting you to something that you still need to anticipate in the future.
Okay, so I want to talk about this. I want this to be the big conversation here, which is, so what does it mean to tell the story? And what triggers this question for me is, at this time of the year, there's a new crop of Haggadot, always, published at this time of year for obvious marketing reasons. And we all get the previews of it or emails of it, and that they're reviewed in the Jewish media, the Forward, and other places. And it seems that everybody's got a new take on the Haggadah. And I'm always stunned by that, not only stunned, but a little envious too, because, after all the years of putting material together, yeah, I've got stuff too. And so one day, well, the three of us, it'll be the Parasha Talk Haggadah, okay? I think that's a great idea, actually. But how do you tell the story? And Jeremy, you just mentioned, the idea that you could probably sit down and open up the book of Exodus and take pieces of chapters 1 to 15 and tell the story. And why would that be a successful Seder? What we write? It's a story. It tells us a story. And could you effectuate? Could you? I don't want to say could you fulfill the obligations of telling the story halachically, because that's a different kind of question. But what does it mean to tell the story? And what are we after when we tell the story? And
So
go
you
ahead.
were saying, we talked again before we started recording about the passage of Rabban Gamliel. You're quite correct. Obviously, if you ask, have I met the traditional halachic obligations of the Seder? That's different from what's the best story that I could tell, or what's the most impactful kinds of conversations we could have, most impactful kinds of rituals. The inherited Jewish Seder is about symbolic food. Rabban Gamliel says you have to mention three kinds of foods. It's possible that the text in question is not Rabban Gamliel II, who lived after the destruction of the temple, but Rabban Gamliel I, who lived during the Korban Pesach era. You have to not only eat the foods, the Pesach, the matzah, and the maror, the meat of the sacrificial lamb back then, and then the bread and the bitter herbs. You have to discuss them, and you have to eat these foods and say what they would mean in the course of a story. So I would think that there are elements, even though there are some elements of rabbinic midrash or whatever that I concede are maybe hard for modern audiences to appreciate unless they're like really familiar with this kind of literature. And yes, open up Exodus 1 through 15, and you're going to get drama and power of that text in a different way. But I need not only a story from Bible times, I need a set of symbolic actions and connected to the food, and those things I think make it alive in the present. And again, I think that the sages are also oriented to a kind of contemporary, like we're still in exile in certain different kinds of ways, which simply telling the story about what happened in Egypt, which ends with a great big success of crossing the Red Sea and having liberation, wouldn't entirely capture that.
I just have a reaction to that, which is, I think part of what's driving the Seder, and certainly the rabbinic literature, the Mishnah and the Talmud around the discussion of Passover, is the remembrance of the Passover sacrifice. Let's not forget that this was a humongous event in the temple era, and that it was a pilgrimage. Hundreds, thousands of people were coming. They were all sacrificing their sheep. It was quite a spectacle, and people were festive. It was a wonderful time of the year, as it is for us. And the temple is destroyed, and there's nothing. It's like they pull out their heart. We had a lecture last night with a medieval Jewish historian, Efi Sholem, and he talked about the fact that it's not well documented, but it is out there, that for maybe a couple of centuries, he mentioned 3-4 centuries, even 5 centuries after the destruction of the temple, there were still pockets of Jews in the Mediterranean basin who were, in their own way, doing a kind of Passover sacrifice, which that was a new thing that I heard, and because that pattern of behavior was so ingrained. And so what you have in the Haggadah is almost a kind of hearkening back to, what do you do when you don't have the ability to congregate and to celebrate as a people? And so I mean, and this is why the Seder stands as one of the greatest religious inventions. I'm not going to say of Judaism, I'm going to say of all religions. This is the Seder itself is a magnificent religious invention that transforms sacrificial pilgrimage to storytelling and to ritual set order at your table. I mean, it's clear. And So, and what you're saying is that the symbolic eating is not so much telling the story of the Exodus. It's about remembering what it meant to be a people that made pilgrimages.
I want to offer a slightly different take. I think what distinguishes Pesach from the other Shalosh Regalim is the amount of yearning that is part of the holiday and part of the story. And what we often forget is that the Exodus is the great story of exile. When you think about it, this people got up, led by God and through the agency of Moshe, and left their home. They were, until they get to the promised land, they are in effect in exile. Until they get to where they're going, they are kind of lost and misguided in the sense that they don't have an adequate guide to lead them because they don't really know where they're going. And
Yeah.
yeah, go on.
I was going to say that's a powerful idea, in the sense that we do not have that association with exile today, living comfortably as we do here in America, nor do we have the direct experience, most of us, of picking up and moving. Look, we're in real time now watching upwards of 4 million people have to pick up their lives, because their homes are being destroyed. There's going to be nothing to return to for many of them, and that desolation, that kind of upheaval. I mean, it uh, it will change the course of history, world history. Something will come out of that will like all great migrations have. You know, and so the experience of exile from your land puts you in it puts you in a different frame. So we don't have that valence, I think, as
Right.
Americans.
But also, when we think of Shavuot and Sukkot, we don't think of them, associate them, I don't think, as holidays with yearning.
Yeah.
We're not longing for something. We love the Torah. We're glad that we got the Torah. We want to study Torah, but it's not something that we're yearning for because we can do it.
It's
Sukkot,
interesting. Yeah,
yeah,
go
go
ahead.
on. No, go.
It's interesting that in Exodus, rather Leviticus 22, which is the holiday cycle, which we read, I guess 23,
23.
which is the holiday cycle that we read in the synagogue um, at this time of year on the holiday readings. And I think most of our listeners may know that all of our holidays have an agricultural referent and a historical referent. They're like probably at some early portion. Pesach was just the early spring holiday, and the barley harvest, and Shavuot is the sort of high late spring, early summer, wheat harvest, and then Sukkot is the big end of the year harvest. And if you look in Leviticus 23, the first two are simply described as agricultural holidays, and Sukkot is given the historical reference because Basukot hoshavti et bnei Yisrael bahotziiotam meretz Mitzrayim. I made them dwell in Sukkot when I took them out of Egypt. Sukkot is the holiday in that passage of the Torah that is associated with redemption from Egypt, which is so counter, the Judaism as inherited. Like it's like that you peel off a layer. It's almost archaeological. You peel off a layer and you see, oh my goodness, for some ancient Jewish text, Passover was just about the barley harvest, but Sukkot, that was about leaving Egypt. And it's so counterintuitive to us because that's not how it ultimately came, into Jewish consciousness. It ultimately came down that Pesach was what it was all about, and Sukkot just has the autumnal thing without much of the Passover association.
Okay. So having talked about the meaning of the story and how do we tell the story, and of course, let's go to this theme. This is one of the central themes of the Haggadah, which is the Chol Amar Belisaper B'tziot Mitzrayim Arei Meshubach, right? And I want
Translate.
to offer an interpretation.
Translate.
It means and all who exalt in or experience vast, expansively in the telling of the story, Harei ze meshubach, this is praiseworthy. Um, and I offer, something to think about, which is that's your license. That's your license for creativity. That's your license for questions. That's your license for skits. That's your license for songs. I wrote down, that we have so many ways of communicating the story. The Haggadot are so beautifully illuminated with such great pictures. There's a visual. The music of the Seder. It's communicates information. The food of the Seder. We can't, think about the Seder without certain tastes. The tactile element of the Seder, which we could explore, and all of the senses which are aroused in so many different ways. And what the Seder invites us to do is to access the story on whatever frequency you are. It's just saying, access the story, tell the story, do the story. So I want to get your reactions to B'chol Amar Be'Lesaper L'Tzion B'Yisraelim, telling the story in any way. I mean, what any not creative ways, but what kinds of innovations do you think of or experience or?
Well, I don't know. I'm not a very creative person in this way, but I do think that going along with the marbeh, you have to make it big. You have to make it harbeh to tell the story expansively. The Haggadah also tells us, and I think Jewish tradition has a great, purchase on this, is you gotta lahafnim, you have to internalize it, because everybody is obliged to see themselves as not only the descendants of people who got liberated thousands of years ago, but personally liberated. And I think that's a what would you say? That's like the task is not to read the book, right? The task is to deepen the book and see yourself in that. And
so that being the other great theme, what are the what do you do to imagine yourself? Are you going to say, like, if you were there, what would you take out? If you were there, what would you be experiencing? Imagine you are a slave, and I mean, is it on that level, or is it, what does it mean to be free? And do we really understand what freedom means?
Well, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. And I think that was Rabbi Chris Christopherson who said that.
Yes.
I think that what we're trying to achieve at the Seder is actually to experience redemption. That the story that we're looking for.
I don't know what that means. What does that mean?
Hold on, let me finish. What the story that we're telling about the past is not about the past, but at least in the phrasing of Rabban Gamliel, it's of the present. We want to feel a sense of redemption. It is for a people that it's a story for a people that no longer lives in the land of their own and no longer experiences God in the miraculous way their ancestors did. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for God. And I think that what we do is we tell this story because that's all that we know. We don't have the direct experience. We only have the experience of our ancestors, and we hope by telling it in the company of our family and friends that we will find it.
I'm not sure.
I'm going to go a little differently.
Go ahead, and I'll just rebut after that. Okay, go ahead.
So I actually think, and there's a risk in what I'm saying, so I'm not unmindful of what the cost would be, but I'm going to go the other way and say that if you're going to internalize it and have some sense of liberation, then you have to look at your own genut, and so you can l'sayem b'sheva. This is what the Mishnah says about the general vector of the Haggadah, is that the story starts off in disgrace and ends up in praise and exaltation.
Like the great rapper Drake says, "I started from the bottom." What is it? Started from the bottom, ended up here. Got it.
You just like him because he's Canadian.
He's Canadian.
But you start off and you say, listen, Avadim Hayinu, and God, we were slaves, and God took us out. You start off and say our ancestors were idol worshippers, and then we developed, then God brought us near and gave us the Torah. And so you tell the bad things, and so you try to orient towards the good things. And I think that what's called upon us is this as much as possible and think about the suffering in our own lives, the own things that enslave us, and think about the ways in which we are liberated. Now, there's a cost because, frankly, that runs the risk of de-Judaizing. It just makes it another human story, and I think that would be a real mistake. And it can easily get trite because then you get the every kind of Haggadah, the whatever Haggadah, and not these are not serious things,
Climate
but
change Haggadah.
the what?
The climate change
The
Haggadah.
climate change Haggadah and the union, the labor law Haggadah, and all these things are real, but they're not centuries old and deep with the same level. But that said, despite the fact that I think that there are costs, I think that conveying to contemporary Jews a sense both of genut and shevach and of degradation and exaltation, I'd rather I focus on that. What is constraint and what is freedom?
All right, so I want to get back to Barry and offer a rebuttal. And here, I think this would be a very fertile debate, even for our listener Seder, which is, Barry, you made the claim that people want to experience some kind of godly presence in the internalizing of the story of redemption. That is, redemption starting at the bottom, going here. I don't agree with that. I think people want to come close to is fellowship, community, family. I think for our generation and for our sector of the community, once you bring God into the whole story, that's when people go okay, it's time for the soup. It's not that I feel bad for God, but
God feels bad for you.
I know, right? But it's I think what God enjoys, speaking for God here, is he enjoys everybody getting together, and that people, what drives the Seder, these thousands of years, is that you're getting together with your family and your closest people, if you don't have a family, your community, and you are experiencing something that is on so many different frequencies at the same time. It's like, the satellite, the Sirius XM radio broadcasting you on 500 channels at the same time, and your receiver is picking up one of these channels or two, and it's getting this is the message I'm getting. And I'm doing that with all these people around me, and I am living out my solidarity with my family, with my community, with my people, and I get just a little glimpse of that. And I think that that's what's going on. I mean,
Okay.
with all due respect to God, with all due respect,
All right. I think, as is often the case, Elliot, there's a great deal of truth and wisdom in what you say. But we are the three of us are heirs to the rabbinic tradition. And we know from the Mishnah that fellowship is enhanced when God is present. That's why when three people sit at the table, the meal is enhanced when we bench, when we say the Birkat Hamazon and we invoke God's name. So I think a lot of people experience Pesach the way that you do because they don't have an avenue to God. It's not that they would deny it if they could, but that they don't have it. So they find something else, which is also very important.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to suggest, and I see by your facial expressions, I'm not expressing it very well.
No, I'm disagreeing with you, but that's okay.
Is that there's a dimension of the holy that pertains to the Seder, and that's what people are looking for. And I think, parenthetically, let me just add, one of the things that I think we often miss about the high holidays is not that people only come once a year, but they come on those days at all.
Yeah.
And they're coming because they're looking for something that they often can't articulate. And when they get there, it's not what they're looking for, and they don't come back, but they know enough, or they are bereft enough to know that something is missing, that the synagogue might be the answer for it. And I think the same with Pesach is that people are looking for a story that they can connect to, and they know that this is a story that people have connected to, even if it doesn't work this year for them, wherever they may go.
So Go ahead.
Can I just also,
Oh, okay.
in the similar vein, of course, it is obviously correct what you're saying. The dimension of communality, communion, fellowship, and what you said earlier in the conversation about the national sense of fellowship that existed until the destruction of the temple, and then was absent from people's lives. That was absolutely true, no question about it. But I don't really think, like, if we scratch the surface a little bit, it is purposeful fellowship. It's covenantal fellowship. It is dam Pesach and dam Brit, the blood that binds the people together at Passover. Said to be in the Exodus story, said to be smeared on the homes. And as you've said, Elliot, so beautifully in previous conversations, it turns the entire home into the altar.
Yeah.
It turns the entire Jewish life and family home into the sacred place. And it binds people, the physical blood of circumcision for the male Jews, the familial blood smeared on the wall of the Korban Pesach, the binding together of the people in those covenantal bonds. Those things cannot be separated, not only from the human connection, but the purposive, we got a point here, and the point is a sanctity that is not exhausted. It involves human connection for sure. The preciousness of it has a great, that human connection, the familial connection, has a great deal to do with it. But I also think that the way we tell the story is, kirvanu hamakom la'avodato. It is oriented towards a purpose of sanctification.
Well, so my reaction to this, of course, I agree with you, but I as you're talking, Barry and Jeremy, as you're talking about this, I'm thinking, like, when I stand up at the beginning of the Seder and recite, the sign Kadesh Urchatz, and then I stand up for Kiddush. I have to say, I'm thinking about my grandparents, my people in my family that are not with me, people in my community that I love, that are at the upstairs Seder. Okay, they're having their Seder with all of the departed members of their families, in this imaginative moment, and I'm thinking not so much about sanctifying God. I'm thinking about being connected to the people, and of course, the instrumentality of that is Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'am, and you've chosen us, and in the instrumentality of that association is all through the sanctification. But let's not, for me, it's I'm connected to those present, those not present, and now in my years of seniority, I'm connected to beyond my generation, and that's that. I want to close with we can go on for a long, but I want to say, you are the most important symbol at the Seder. We make such a great uh, pastiche of the Seder plate, a performance, and all these symbols. But you are the most important symbol because you are the symbol of continuity for generations. And I can't get past it. And it's like, God. I leave God alone. God is with me. God is. We're joyful. Shechianu, hallelujah. Thank you, God. Thank you for the redemption. And that's a big thing. It's a big thing. Okay. But I'm with everybody.
So what I would add, and you express yourself very eloquently, Elliot, is that when you were talking, I was reminded of Martin Buber, who I read much of when I was younger, and I continue to read as I'm older, because there's something about his presentation that I find stirring. And what I would say to what you said is that it's not a separation between the family and God, but the way to God is through the family and through those images of your people. That, in other words, we're not going to separate out and make a separate search for God. We're going to use the people that are with us and the people that we remember as a path to God.
Yeah. But I think, like, for a great number of the people that we are talking to and their families, like, that's not the issue. God is not the issue. But that's why we're here. We're here to kind of
But this is,
bang the
I mean,
point.
I think instantiating, what you said is that this remains, Barry pointed out the high holidays and I usually think that the holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, high holidays of the synagogue, and Pesach is the high holiday of the home. And these are the two things that are most, by far, far, far and away, fully observed in American Jewish life.
Sure.
And still today, with all the falling away, people who are connected to Judaism, even in whatever way that they are, they will be celebrating Pesach with friends and family. And for that, we should definitely be super
Thankful.
grateful.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? We just touched the surface. I wish we could literally, the three of us, go on until Kriyat Shema, like they did in Bnei Brak, and say, Giaz Man, it's time to recite the morning Shema. But this, I hope that we've just given a little bit of taste of the Passover discussions to our viewers and listeners. We thank you so much for spending the time with us. We're so honored by you being here with us. And thank you for your comments, and thank you for all your interest. And I've met many people over the last little while just who have said how much this show really means to them. I know that applies to Jeremy and to Barry as well. And just for all of us, let's just say Hag Sameah, Hag
Sameah.
Sameah, a beautiful and meaningful Pesach. And we'll see you on our next edition of Parsha Talk. Bye-bye.